This is Francis Ferrugia welcoming you to tonight's WM Daily News. Thank you for joining us. Thousands of Iranian anti-government protesters have clashed with hardliners on the streets of Tehran as marches turned into running battles. Opposition protesters chanting "Death to the dictator" hurled stones and bricks in clashes with security forces, firing tear gas. The opposition held its first major street protests since mid-July, bringing out thousands in demonstrations in several parts of the capital, while tens of thousands marched in government-sponsored rallies marking an annual anti-Israel commemoration. The commemoration, known as Quds Day, is a major political occasion for the government, where the country shows its support for the Palestinians. Quds is the Arabic word for Jerusalem. During a speech for the rallies, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad rallied against Israel and the West, questioning whether the Holocaust occurred and calling it a pretext for occupying Arab land. But the opposition was determined to turn the day into a show of its survival and continued strength, despite a fierce 3-month-old crackdown against it since the disputed June the 12th presidential election. Top opposition leaders joined the protests in direct defiance of commands by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who barred anti-government demonstrations on Quds Day. That could provoke an escalation in the crackdown. Hardline clerics have been demanding the past week that any leader backing the protests should be arrested. Tens of thousands joined the government-organized marches, starting in various parts of the capital and proceeding to Tehran University. Police and security forces, along with pro-government Basij militiamen, fanned out along many squares and avenues, and in many cases tried to keep nearby opposition protesters away from the Quds Day rallies to prevent clashes, witnesses said. Opposition supporters poured onto main boulevards and squares, wearing green t-shirts and wristbands and waving green banners and balloons, the color of the reform movement. They waved their fingers in the air in V for Victory signs, along with pictures of opposition leader Mir Hussein Mousavi chanting "Death to the dictator." Others chanted "Not Gaza, not Lebanon, our life is for Iran," a slogan directly challenging the government's support for anti-Israeli Palestinian militants in Gaza and Lebanon's Hezbollah guerrilla. Some shouted for Mr. Ahmadinejad's government to resign. The White House has said that United States President Barack Obama will host a meeting on Tuesday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs says the three-way meeting will take place after Mr. Obama meets separately with each of the two leaders. All the meetings will take place on Tuesday in an effort to lay the groundwork for renewed negotiations. U.S. Special Envoy George Mitchell says it is another sign of Mr. Obama's commitment to comprehensive peace. The meetings will take place in New York on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly meeting. Efforts to reduce poverty across the world will fail without measures to halt destruction of the environment and loss of wildlife, leading scientists have warned. The experts said targets to halt biodiversity loss by 2010 are set to be missed, and the failure could undermine goals to end hunger and poverty and boost education and health by the middle of the next decade. The experts, led by the economist Professor Jeffrey Sachs and including Chief Government Scientist Professor John Beddington and researchers from British universities and the Zoological Society of London, said the links between development and the environment were complex. But efforts to tackle the root causes of both poverty and wildlife loss could produce win-win outcomes, they wrote in the journal Science. For example, reducing the pressures of a growing population by promoting contraception in poor areas could alleviate poverty and support conservation efforts. And with growing global problems such as climate change, population growth and overconsumption of natural resources, conservation and development agendas need to be more closely integrated, they said. The group goes on to say that schemes which use existing land more efficiently for agriculture, secure better access to seeds and technology, or provide finance to help poor countries cope with climate change and prevent deforestation will all have positive benefits for both the environment and people's well-being. Dr. Kate Jones, Senior Research Fellow at ZSL, said while conservationists and anti-poverty experts might not in the past have been able to see what Save the Child has to do with Save the Panda, many of the root causes of poverty and environmental damage were the same. One of the big factors is overpopulation, and consumption is really high, which is causing deforestation, fisheries to be overexploited, and too much pollution going into oceans. She said the poorest people were those dependent on the land, for example subsistent farmers, and once the environment was degraded they were the ones hardest hit by the absence of natural resources such as fish. Professor Jonathan Bailey, director of the conservation at ZSL, said many of the fundamental causes of poverty and environmental degradation are the same, such as pressures caused by unsustainable human population growth. The conservation and development communities need to focus on solutions that will provide win-win outcomes for all life on this planet. The issue of overpopulation and contraception is a highly controversial one, however, since other social scientists believe that the world has got enough resources for all of the world's population. A decreasing childbirth rate poses serious threats to the economy, and the issue of poverty itself, examined more thoroughly in terms of its economic causes via trade agreements and inequalities between the rich and the poor, serve to highlight deeper realities which challenge the human will to ask more searching questions about an over-consuming Western world that in itself pays little respect to these environmental issues that lie in the field of ecology. A father of two who was shot dead at his front door in what is believed to be a gang-related attack has been named by police. Amran Khan, 29, from Oldham, Great Manchester, was gunned down on Friday night when he opened his door on hearing a disturbance. 3 shots were fired at the victim, who lived on Nugget Street, and one of the bullets hit him in the chest, police said. He died at the Royal Oldham Hospital in the early hours of Saturday, leaving behind a wife and 2 young daughters, aged 1 and 4 years old. Officers are trying to establish a motive, but according to sources the attack may have been gang-related. Chief Superintendent Caroline Ball from Oldham Police urged anyone with information to come forward. She said tragically a young man has lost his life as a result of this shooting, and our thoughts are with his wife and 2 young daughters during this traumatic time. We understand the community will be very shocked and deeply upset by what has happened, so I would ask that they work with us to help find whoever is responsible for Amran's murder. If the answers are in the community, then that positive dialogue will help us find Amran's killers. Ms. Ball said there would be an increased police presence in the area over the coming days to reassure residents.